She's like an old stapler, still works, but doesn't fit the pace anymore. That's what I heard him say. Mason Corrick, the new COO, fresh from some trendy fintech graveyard, still wearing his hoodie like it proved something. I wasn't supposed to hear it. It was a closed Zoom prep with the board before the quarterly review. I was dialing in early to run a back-end sound check, but they'd already started. And Mason, apparently, didn't check if his mic was muted. He laughed after he said it. So did two of the junior VPs. She's reliable, one added, but she gives off filing cabinet energy. I sat there, 19 years of loyalty compressed into the shape of a stapler. I was Jenna Carlisle, lead systems architect of LayerLock and VanguardNet, the secure global access infrastructure powering Stratusport's operations across 27 countries. I had built this system from the ground up through acquisitions, through data breaches, through midnight firewall collapses, and cross-border compliance crises. When the Zurich server melted down in 2014, I was on a call for 29 hours straight, patching manually from a hotel lobby during my wedding anniversary. When a Russian botnet targeted our partner firms in 2017, I rewrote our defensive code in real time while eating instant noodles at my desk. Mason had been here 9 months. His first act as COO outsourced core security reviews to a third-party firm in Prague. His second, strip DevOps of independent oversight. His third, begin replacing department heads over the age of 45. He didn't know me. He didn't care to. I didn't scale. He once told HR off record, I didn't fit the speed. But what hit hardest wasn't the insult. It was the laughter. How easily they chuckled, like my entire career had been reduced to something old, slightly rusty, and vaguely in the way. I sat frozen at my desk, blinking at the screen, the heat rising behind my eyes, not from anger, but from shame. I wasn't even fired yet, and somehow, I already felt discarded. It's funny how one careless insult can make you question everything, and yet, the truth of who you are doesn't vanish just because someone younger, louder, and shinier doesn't see it. After that meeting, I didn't quit. I didn't retaliate. I didn't even reply. I shut my laptop and sat in silence. Not in defeat, but in reflection. I started at Stratusport when we were still just 6 floors of leased office space and a dream of global logistics integration. Back then, I was Jenna Carlisle, junior network engineer, 26, new to enterprise systems, terrified I'd fry the entire grid if I misconfigured one switch. But I didn't fry anything. I learned fast, worked late, and showed up every day like it mattered because it did. Within 4 years, I was promoted to systems lead. I designed the architecture for what eventually became LayerLock, our internal access protocol that scaled as we expanded across continents. Not flashy, not customer-facing, but it was the nervous system of everything. Then came VanguardNet, our proprietary global credential infrastructure. I built it from scratch, coded it in phases, field-tested it across time zones. I created the silent network that kept 19,000 employees connected securely. We launched in Germany, Brazil, Singapore, Dubai. 27 countries, 19 years, 0 system-wide failures. Not once did LayerLock collapse. Not once did VanguardNet go dark. There were scares, sure. In 2011, a configuration bug from an external vendor almost bypassed our permission tree. I caught it at 3:41 a.m. and patched it manually by sunrise. In 2017, when a hostile entity tried brute forcing our credentials in waves, I introduced randomized checkpoint variants and outpaced the attack before lunch. I was never the loudest in the room, never the one asking for applause, but I kept the lights on, and 5 years ago, I turned down a CTO offer from Vitrionics, the same company now leading AI-led supply chains in Asia. Their recruiter said, "Name your price." I declined. I stayed. Not because I lacked ambition, but because I believed in what we built here, in the team, in the system, in the mission, because loyalty still meant something to me. In that moment, I reopened my old employment agreement 2008, back when we still used paper signatures. I flipped through the scanned pages, half out of nostalgia, half out of something else I couldn't yet name. And that's when I saw it. Clause 17.6. System Contingency Authorization. A line I had written into the architecture proposal and had the foresight to bind legally to my role. Still active, still valid. They'd forgotten. I hadn't. They started disappearing quietly. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but piece by piece. By the end of Mason Corrick's third month as COO, 5 senior engineers were gone. No send-offs, no announcements, just off-boarded. He said, realigning talent. What he really meant was replacing experience with obedience. He moved fast, like all disruptors do, claimed we were bloated, legacy-heavy. He replaced our internal security audits with a third-party vendor based out of Prague, cheaper, newer, more agile. He said our DevSecOps pipeline was too slow for a scalable future and stripped oversight from my team. I pushed back, politely, professionally. I documented my concerns, presented risk scenarios, and proposed phased integrations. But during one meeting, when I raised a question about protocol integrity, Mason cut me off mid-sentence. You're not resisting change. Are you, Jenna? Because nothing kills innovation faster than nostalgia. That word nostalgia was his label for anyone who'd built the foundation he now stood on. What he didn't know or didn't care to learn was that our layer lock framework wasn't just code. It was woven into every client portal, every executive dashboard, every cross-border compliance module. You don't unplug and rewire a nervous system overnight. But he didn't want nervous systems. He wanted speed. Applause. His next bullet point for the board. 2 weeks later, I got an encrypted message from Pavel Starek, one of the lead engineers at the Prague firm Mason had outsourced to. Jenna, I hope it's okay I reached out directly. There's something off. We found credential traffic rerouted through a deprecated IP. Not ours. Not yours. Looks like someone internally is piggybacking access off the Frankfurt nodes. We weren't told about these users. Frankfurt. One of our German clients. Financial sector. High sensitivity. I ran my own diagnostic and froze. The logs showed a new DevOps hire had been granted admin-level clearance without flag. Without redundancy. Without two-factor on a core EU node. 3 days later, I got word from our German liaison a partner firm had received misrouted documents. Confidential quarterly projections, not meant for them. The contract they'd been finalizing, worth $4.6 million, collapsed overnight. They blamed a technical glitch. I knew better. But when I tried to report it internally, Mason's assistant emailed me back, "Thank you for your concern. Jenna, please redirect future workflow inquiries through our innovation office." Innovation. That was the word they hid behind. But I knew what I was looking at. Not innovation. Infiltration. And the man leading it all didn't just misunderstand the system, he was actively unraveling it. Worse, he didn't trust people like me. So now, I didn't trust him. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been too obvious, too confrontational. Instead, it crept in like frost under a closed door. Small things, subtle omissions, quiet removals no one announced, but everyone understood. The first sign came when I tried to access the layer lock permissions matrix to run a quarterly sweep. My credentials bounced, access denied. I figured it was a system delay, but it didn't resolve in an hour, or by the next morning. No explanation, no ticket opened, just silence. The next week, a calendar invite for our global compliance sync never arrived in my inbox. I thought maybe the new junior scheduler had forgotten to include me until I saw the screenshots in a follow-up email. They'd had the meeting without me. They'd discussed cross-border risk flags, biometric signature reviews, and a new IP deployment model for Frankfurt, my Frankfurt. I reached out to Mason's office. No response. Reached out again. Still nothing. That Friday, I asked Mia, one of the newer engineers I'd been mentoring, to Forward me a test log for the North American Access module. She replied within minutes, cheerful and unaware. Sure thing, sending over the full permissions grid we're validating internally. I opened the spreadsheet. At first, I didn't register what I was looking at. My eyes scanned through columns of names, color-coded roles, active timestamps. And then I saw it. Jenna Carlisle revoked. Not inactive. Not pending review. Revoked. My name had been manually removed from LayerLock's highest access nodes access I had architected, trained for, and maintained for nearly 2 decades. I didn't breathe for a moment, just stared. 3 months ago. I had missed my daughter's college graduation. I was supposed to fly out to Austin, watch her walk the stage. Instead, I was in the server room at 2:24 a.m., patching an emergency vulnerability that threatened to expose our South American client credentials. The breach was real. The fix was critical. No one else could do it fast enough. She understood. She always did. But I never forgave myself. And now they were erasing me quietly, systematically, and without ever looking me in the eye. I had built the walls of the system, every access key, every redundancy, every fallback layer. I knew what they were doing, and worse, I knew what was coming. Because when a system starts revoking its architect, what follows isn't innovation, it's collapse. The morning after I saw my access revoked, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank document, and began writing what would become my final formal warning. I didn't use exclamation points, no bold red flags, just clean language, risk matrices, and system impact summaries, because emotion gives them an excuse to dismiss you. Logic doesn't. The subject line was Clinical LayerLock Core Exposure, Urgent Access Anomalies, Frankfurt, NA nodes. I detailed the misassigned permissions. I included the Prague vendor's alert. I cited the German contract loss, though no one had officially linked it to internal failings. I referenced potential violations of EU privacy law, given the admin-level clearance granted without proper encryption protocols. I wrote it the way I'd written hundreds of security advisories before neutral. Technical, irrefutable. I sent it to Mason, CC'd it legal, risk, compliance, and the DevOps escalation chain. I even sent a copy to the assistant CTO just in case. Then I waited. An hour passed, then 2, then 4. At 3:15 p.m., I got a reply. It was from Mason's office, 3 lines. Thank you for your input. We've reviewed your concerns and consider them non-actionable at this time. Please focus on current transition priorities. That was it. No questions, no follow-up. Just a digital pat on the head and a quiet shove toward the exit. My hands stayed still on the keyboard. My jaw locked tight. I didn't scream, didn't type a fiery rebuttal, didn't blast out a reply all. Instead, I opened a separate secure browser window. Stratusport maintained a compliance mechanism called Archive 6, a dormant internal inbox that received quarterly submissions for legal audits. It wasn't monitored in real time, but every quarter. The compliance team ran automated checks to surface anything marked elevated. I knew this because I had helped design it. I forwarded my memo there, but this time I attached something else. A file titled Core Log JC June 17.6b access recon.log. It was a raw activity log. Buried in it was evidence that Mason had manually approved a credential override on a core module without redundancy, without oversight. The log wasn't easy to read unless you knew what to look for. I highlighted it in yellow. Then I hit send. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't hint or whisper or warn. But in that moment, my anger boiling, sharp, coiled in my chest finally found somewhere to live. Not in shouting, not in protest, but in documentation, in the record, in the system they thought I no longer controlled. And eventually, someone would find it. And when they did, they wouldn't be able to look away. The message arrived at 6:01 a.m. No greeting, no explanation, no human touch. Termination confirmed. Effective immediately. That was it. Just 4 words. After 19 years, 3 continents, 4 system architectures, 17 overnight saves, and not a single failure, I was removed with a canned line of text and a timestamp. I blinked twice at the screen, wondering if it was a phishing scam. I hovered over the sender. No red flags. It came from the official HR automation account, an automated message from no-reply at stratussportcorp.com. I checked again. Not a dream, not a mistake. Just finished. No one called. No one met me in person. No thank you for your service. No offboarding protocol. No dignity. Just a trigger. And that word confirmed hit me like ice in the lungs. Because I remembered something no one else did. Something buried beneath the years and the meetings and the updates and the upgrades. 2011. Back when we were still patching firewall breaches manually at 2:38 a.m. and praying the VPN tunnels wouldn't collapse during live deployments. Back when we didn't have the resources or the personnel to fight off a coordinated attack that locked down our Madrid server farm for 3 hours. That's when I built it, Protocol Halcyon. A contingency mechanism, invisible, silent. Not a backdoor, but a safeguard. A rule embedded into the heart of VanguardNet's access architecture. If primary architect is removed from system without direct human authorization, and a specific trigger phrase is used, global access keys begin automatic revocation cascade. The phrase I'd chosen, termination, confirmed. A phrase no real person would ever use to fire someone with decency. A phrase so sterile, so detached, so corporate, it would only be generated by an algorithm trying to sound human. The moment I read it, my pulse dropped. Not from fear, from recognition. I minimized the message and opened my private console, the one no one remembered still existed, because I was the one who built the shutdown protocol registry to begin with. Access granted. Lines of code scrolled automatically, one by one. It began EU node flagged. Singapore node initiating lock. New York finance cluster disconnecting external credentials. Admin master list clearing authority chain. I sat there, completely still, wrapped in a thick, electric silence. This wasn't a plan. This wasn't revenge. This was architecture, obeying its conditions. The system was doing exactly what I'd programmed it to do 14 years ago. Not out of spite, out of safety. Because I had always known one day, someone wouldn't bother to read what they were deleting. Someone would prioritize speed over protocol, image over infrastructure, and that someone had finally arrived. So when they pushed me out of the system, they pulled the plug on themselves. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I closed the message, stood up, and made coffee. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee still warm, opened my personal laptop, the old silver one with the scuffed corner, and logged into a legacy console I hadn't touched in over 6 years. The login prompt blinked twice, paused to verify the biometric fallback, then opened smoothly. Access granted. They'd forgotten about it, because only I had ever used the redundant systems bridge I built during the Madrid collapse in 2011. It was never listed on the active access registry. I'd routed it through a back-channel dev node to isolate it from attack patterns, and apparently, from memory. I watched as Protocol Halcyon began its sweep. Frankfurt's credential tree cleared first. One by one, European node managers dropped from the admin roster. Then Singapore core gateway locked. External vendor keys nullified. API ports throttled to 0. Then, New York 3 red flags hit at once. The finance cluster blinked out. Just as a director tried to log in from his Upper West Side apartment, I recognized his name. Marcus Lin, Executive VP of Global Finance. He was mid-negotiation with a private equity firm rumored value $72 million. He would have been deep in a call, reviewing documents in the shared environment I built. I watched as the system rejected his login, twice, then permanently. It wasn't personal, it was procedural. The architecture was just following the logic. Each removal followed the same rule: if the architect is terminated without direct authorization, and no human countersign is present. Revoke all permissions tied to global access keys. The phrase termination confirmed had done the rest. The trigger had been hit. The cascade was clean, surgical. I didn't type a line. I didn't press a key. All I did was observe. From the outside, it might have looked like chaos, but from here inside the core, I saw precision. I saw order. It was exactly how I designed it. When people build systems, they often imagine failure coming from outside hackers, viruses, rogue actors. But I had always known the greatest risk came from within, from people too rushed, too arrogant, or too careless to understand what they were dismantling. So I had prepared. Not for revenge, but for recklessness. They thought removing me would be quiet. They didn't realize removing me would activate a system louder than any voice I could ever raise. I took a sip of coffee, watched as Tokyo dimmed on the map, then Sydney, then Toronto. There was no malice in me, only calm. They had made the decision, they had typed the trigger, and now, all I had to do was let the code run. The call came as Sydney dimmed on the dashboard, a quiet flicker of red over the Pacific. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring 3 times before I tapped accept and raised the phone slowly to my ear. "What the hell did you do?" Mason didn't even say hello. His voice was sharp, cracking under the weight of panic. I could hear keys clattering in the background, a tech assistant muttering something about Singapore failing to verify master credentials. "We've lost Frankfurt, Singapore, New York. Everything's going dark. Are you seriously behind this? You need to stop it right now." I stayed silent for a breath, listening not to what he said, but to what he was becoming. "I didn't do anything." "Mason," I said finally, voice even, almost clinical. "The system did what it was designed to do." "Don't play smart with me," he snapped. "We're losing live contracts. Do you have any idea what you've triggered?" I did, better than he ever would. "You used the phrase, Mason. Termination confirmed. That's not just cold, that's a trigger." He paused, confused, then furious again. "A trigger? What the hell does that mean?" "Clause 17.6, I said. Calm, precise. My employment contract. Dated May of 2008. Still active, still enforceable." There was a long, aching silence on the other end. I imagined him scrolling through legal files, now searching, fumbling, maybe reading the clause for the very first time. That clause gave me the right to build a contingency protocol into LayerLock and VanguardNet. I continued. "In the event of non-verified termination, without executive countersign, and if a specific language queue is used, the system triggers automatic revocation of all global access tied to the primary architect." "This is insane," he muttered. You can't be allowed to build a bomb into our infrastructure." "It's not a bomb," I said. "It's a seatbelt, and you just cut it mid-collision. This can't be legal. It's documented. Every quarterly update, every audit trail. You just didn't read it." He went quiet again. No yelling now, just breathing fast. Heavy. "Can you undo it?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to sit in the stillness, to feel what it was like when power left the room without slamming the door. Reversing it would require biometric re-verification and a mutual authorization key, I said, both of which expired the moment your message hit my inbox. "We're going to lose the Tokyo deal," he whispered. "Then I suggest you explain to the board how a forward email cost them $72 million. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply let the truth hang. Sharp and undeniable. Clause 17.6 wasn't revenge. Mason, it was a boundary. You crossed it." The system responded. I ended the call, not with fury, not with satisfaction, just with certainty. By the time Toronto blinked out, the silence in my kitchen felt heavier than any alarm, A new email slid into my inbox, not from Mason this time, but from the internal corporate relay, still linked to my administrative alias. They hadn't purged it yet. Subject: emergency session. Urgent access review, timestamp 6:41 a.m. They were scrambling, and I didn't need to read the body to know why. Somewhere on the 35th floor, a boardroom full of executives and attorneys had convened in a panic. Their screens were dark, nodes locked out, and systems collapsing across multiple time zones. The crown jewel of their operations, VanguardNet, was in protocol lockdown, and no one left in the room knew how to stop it. I imagined Mason, red-faced, gesturing wildly while legal counsel tried to parse what Clause 17.6 even was. Their CTO flipping through archived contracts, discovering for the first time a compliance provision added in 2008, signed by a long-retired board. Still active and enforceable. I took another sip of coffee. Inside that boardroom, the lawyers were hitting brick walls. One of them must have realized biometric re-authentication was mandatory after a triggered cascade, but no one on the current C-suite had the signature permissions to satisfy the requirement, and the deadline was ticking. At 6:51 a.m., another message appeared, internal chat logs forwarded unintentionally from a junior engineer I once mentored. Wait, did anyone run the reauth script? That cycle hits at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. Right. Has anyone else run it before, besides Jenna? No one had, because for nearly a decade, I was the one who ran the quarterly re-verification manually. On time. Without fail. It wasn't documented. It was just understood. One of those invisible rituals that systems silently depend on until they don't. I leaned back in my chair. At 6:58 a.m., my phone rang. I knew the name before it lit up the screen. Charles Branford, founder of Stratusport, now retired. A man who once stood by my designs like they were the bones of the company. I answered. Jenna, he said. Voice hoarse with age and something softer regret. I should have never let them replace your name on the system. You weren't just part of it. You were the system. I said nothing for a beat. Then quietly, it wasn't personal. It was protocol. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just said, I hope they finally understand the cost of not listening. We ended the call there. No drama, no requests, just recognition. And for the first time in months, I felt no bitterness, no need to prove anything. The system had already done that for me. The boardroom was collapsing, not from sabotage, but from neglect. They erased the architect and the foundation obeyed. The morning after everything collapsed, I powered down the old laptop and closed the lid for the final time. The console had run its last command. I didn't bother checking for new emails from Stratusport. There was nothing left I needed to see. I had no interest in watching them scramble. I didn't take any victory laps, no media leaks, no legal press releases, just silence. Let the silence speak. Later that afternoon, I received a short message from a company I'd admired quietly for years, a non-profit software firm that specialized in building security systems for hospitals, schools, and humanitarian missions. We've followed your work. We believe security should protect people, not just shareholders. We'd be honored if you'd join us as a lead advisor on ethical systems. No pitch decks, no inflated salaries, no promises of IPOs. Just purpose. I stared at the message for a long time, then softly closed the tab. I wasn't sure yet if I'd say yes, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the freedom to choose. I didn't sue Stratusport, not because I lacked grounds. I had more than enough. My attorney had drafted a full complaint, complete with breach of protocol, wrongful termination, and IP sabotage. But I told him, don't file, just forward. And he did. One email. To the executive board. Subject line triggered by their own arrogance. Attached were 2 files, a scanned copy of my 2008 contract, clearly marked with Clause 17.6, a clean system log from 6:02 a.m., showing the exact moment Protocol Halcyon engaged itself. No commentary, no explanation, just evidence. And a reminder some systems don't need to scream to prove they were right. That night, I boxed up the old technical manuals I'd clung to through the years, my layer lock drafts, the Vanguard Net flowcharts, my archived architecture proposals. Each page had once carried so much weight. But now, I felt light. As I was coiling a forgotten Ethernet cable into a drawer, my daughter stepped into the room. She held her phone out, glowing with a new message. Her smile was wide, but her voice shook slightly. Mom. I got in. I applied for the cybersecurity program. I want to do what you do. I froze, not out of shock, but because something in me, something old and wounded, began to close gently, like a door no longer needed. I turned toward her. She looked like I once did, curious, capable, unafraid to be serious in a world that often isn't. Then you already understand, I said quietly, what it means to protect something no one sees until it breaks. She nodded. And for the first time since 6:01 a.m., I breathed. Not as the architect, not as the one who built it, not even as the one who watched it fall, but simply as someone who let go, and still stood whole. There's a reason I chose to stay silent when they fired me. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes quiet strength speaks louder than outrage. I built something to protect people, and in the end, it protected me. If this story reminded you of your own experience of being overlooked, pushed aside, or underestimated, then I hope it also reminded you that value doesn't vanish just because someone else refuses to see it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever walked away with your dignity when others tried to erase it? Drop your story in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone. If this story moved you, please give it a like. If you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. And if you want more stories like this, true, raw, and real, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones who build the systems that hold everything together, and their voices deserve to be heard.